first off, my name is Don Bloomquist. I am the director of the customer success team here. Joining me today are the majority of, maybe not the majority, but several of our customer success team members. We have representation from both our technical team and our customer success managers. So as a group, we would really like to welcome you to today's session. This is the first of what we plan to do almost on a monthly basis. So just about every month, you should see an invite, and we will be holding a training session on a particular topic on Flosum or one of Flosum's other Salesforce DevOps related products, those being Data Migrator and our database backup and recovery solutions. Okay. So to get started, I want to do a quick introduction to today's topic. From there, we will get into some logistics on how you can answer questions. We have a short slide presentation for you, and that will be followed with a live demo and training session. Okay. So the purpose of today's meeting, the purpose of today's training session is to dive into how you will go about resolving conflicts within Flosum. What are your opportunities to resolve conflicts, and what are some of the nuances and key kind of capabilities and features on how the actual merge conflicts screen work. As we get in, when we run through this agenda, we are first going to start with an overview of merging conflicts, at which point we'll also chat about what opportunities do you have to do those within Flosum, what kind of practices and recommendations do we have for you on when you can merge or when you should merge those conflicts. We will, as I just described earlier, talk about some of the key practices within Flosum and offer some training on the actual feature, the UI, the screens themselves. And then rather than have QA just at the very end, I want to call everyone's attention to how you should, or how we would ask that you go about raising questions. On the bottom panel of your screen within the Zoom invite, there is a Q&A icon, and we encourage you to post your questions, your chatter, what you need to know about more into that box. We have several from our success team that will attempt to answer those questions, and some of those questions, if we think they need a little bit more direct in-person follow-up, we'll have a takeaway, and we can take those away and get those questions answered for you. So to start with an overview from conflicts, let's chat about conflicts in general within Salesforce development. And really, the fact of the matter is conflicts are inevitable. Whether you have large teams with multiple projects, multiple teams working within or towards a singular Salesforce org or environment, or whether you're working towards multiple production orgs, or whether you have a relatively simple small-scale team with 3 developers, you will at some point come across a conflict where one developer is working on a change, another developer is working on a second change, and inevitably at some point in time, those changes very well could involve the same components. And so those are the opportunities. You don't want to overwrite one another's code. So how do we best manage those conflicts? How do we best manage those changes so that neither of your developers' code is getting overwritten, neither of your team's code is getting overwritten? And there are some challenges with conflicts within the Salesforce environment that are a little different than some of the more programmatic languages that we've seen in previous software development. I mean, Salesforce has a rapid development, a rapid deployment model. So we have to be able to accommodate for that. We know conflicts can be painful. So how do we automatically detect and resolve those in the most efficient manner possible so that your teams can proceed and become more efficient and not have any worries about overwriting code and the effort it takes to figure out what went wrong? Okay. One of the kind of the general nuances that happens within Salesforce is many of the components are actually stored within XML files. And that is a uniqueness to Salesforce development. If we look at a Git-based system or tools that require a Git-based interaction to try to manage and merge these conflicts, I mean, Git does quite a pretty good job at managing conflicts or helping manage conflicts where there is a programmatic component. So in the Salesforce world, that's essentially Apex classes and Apex triggers. But for all those other components, Git has some real challenges. It can be cumbersome. And if you really kind of dive in and start to try to manage some of those within a Git-based environment or a Git-based tool, you'll see a lot of what we call false negatives. So you end up with a lot of lines that appear that they are conflicts, but they're not really in the background because an XML file, the ordering, Git doesn't do a good job at interpreting the ordering. Where Flosum, I think one of the powerful things about Flosum within the merge conflict feature that Flosum provides is it actually reconfigures the XML in the background. So it basically does a reordering of those XML components and tags and such. And really the end result is you end up getting a true, transparent kind of a line by line or block by block comparison of what is a real conflict and what is not. So I think there's a big advantage there in terms of not wasting time in what we call those false conflicts. Within that UI, I think we'll demo today, we'll show some of the color coding in the UI so you can easily detect was a change and how best to resolve those changes and how to do those in either a line by line or block by block basis or on a bulk basis if you have the comfort level to do so. And finally, I think the real goal here, the real goal of what we hope to achieve today is we want to help you move faster without breaking anything. We want to help you deploy safely so that you never have a code overwrite. And if you follow a process within Flosum, if you use this merge conflict capability as such, you should never have any code overwrites, and you should be able to move at a much more efficient pace. Okay, so to do that, where are our opportunities to resolve conflicts? We know within Flosum, the merge conflict is the same thing. Everything is held directly within Flosum, so it's built on the Salesforce platform. It is built specifically to manage Salesforce components, whether they're programmatic or whether they are XML based. And so those opportunities to resolve conflicts, the two opportunities we see here on the left, when you are merging branches or when you are doing impact analysis, those are the two areas we are going to focus on most today. Those are the two primary areas where you have the ability to identify and merge conflicts, whether they're within branches or whether they are between a branch and a target environment that you would hope to deploy to. And we'll talk to those differences shortly. The two items on the right, I just wanted to call out because there are opportunities within Flosum. We use kind of that same screen for multiple purposes. But when you are committing to the repository, you do actually have a merge option there. I won't focus too much on that merge option because it works very similar to what we'll see in merging branches. However, I will talk to, for just a minute or two, a couple of the options that we want you to consider when you are merging or committing your changes back to the repository so that you end up keeping that repository clean and pristine to what you have just deployed to your production environment. And finally, we do have that same merge conflict screen that we make use of for some view only or read only type purposes. So for example, when you're looking at committing a snapshot to a branch and you have differences, or when you're looking at doing a comparison between different versions from a component on a branch, you'll see a similar screen, the same kind of look and feel, but they are for informational purposes. Okay, so what I'm trying to present here is a bit more of a graphical view of where your opportunities to merge conflicts are and where we're going to be focusing today. In this diagram, this is a pretty standard release management process. If you do not, as a company or as a development group, have a documented release process, we do recommend you do so. We find this is very helpful, one for us, but two, most importantly for our clients, in that you know exactly what that process should be as your team members change, as people come in, as you want to talk about how you become more efficient. Having something on paper like this really, really helps. So I do want to encourage you to do that as an aside from today's meeting. In this process, I won't talk a lot about the process itself, but I do want to talk to a couple of the key areas where you will have opportunities to resolve conflicts. And the first area I'm going to huddle, in this example, we have several what we call feature branches, and they are indicated by FB1, FB2, etc. And the contents of these feature branches, we generally recommend that they would entail a business requirement, possibly addressed via as an example, if you use Jira, a Jira ticket. And so this would equate to, one requirement, two requirements, three requirements. And at some point in time with your development process, maybe that is a continual development model, maybe it's at a certain point, when those changes are ready, you have the opportunity to merge that into a team branch, or if you're a smaller shop, maybe you're just merging directly into a release branch. Now, the first branch that gets in there will be merging into basically an empty container, so you don't have to worry about conflicts. But the next time somebody wants to merge in, say developer 2 comes up with their feature and it's called feature branch 2, when they want to merge that branch into this team branch or a release branch, if you're going directly there, there is an opportunity for conflict. And this red line here represents anytime we're merging into a next step branch, we have an opportunity to merge conflicts. So that is kind of primary area number one that I wanted to focus and mention today, because we know feature branch 1, feature branch 2, they may have no related components, and that's okay. The merge will be very quick and easy. Or they may have components that are shared between them, and they may have differences in what each developer, the changes that they performed on that component. And so you can merge them in this team branch. In this diagram, this is a little bit for larger teams that might have team or project branches, and that at the end need to consolidate them into an overall release branch. You have another opportunity where you can merge your team branches into this release branch. And again, these reddish arrows indicate that opportunity to merge conflicts at that point in time. And pending your deployment process, anytime you're merging branches into a consolidated branch, you have this opportunity to merge those conflicts. Make sure you're not overwriting anything. And at the end of the day, after those conflicts have been merged, you can make choices on what to do with that, whether that's getting set to deploy to high-level environments, whether that's using pipelines to deploy that merged change into an environment on an automated basis. Okay. Now, the second primary opportunity that you have to merge conflicts, this is a little less so within requirements, but as you have a branch, and as in Flosum you deploy branches to environments, if you have any concerns that the target environment that you would like to deploy to may have differences that you're not expecting, those differences could have come from somebody going in and manually making changes direct into that org, or potentially maybe you have differing projects going on, and one project has kind of operated on a separate stream from what the other project has been working on, and rather than consolidating into a joint release branch, maybe one project has deployed to an environment, regardless of what that environment is. And you certainly don't want to overwrite or wipe out those changes that project team has done. So Flosum has a feature. The feature is called Impact Analysis, that allows you to do a real-time conflict check against an org before you do a deployment to ensure that you never overwrite changes that are sitting in that environment. It gives you the opportunity to look at what is in your branch, compare that to what is in that target org, and you should see differences. I mean, you want to do a deployment, so you will expect to see differences, but it allows you to do that sanity check to make sure and give you the opportunity to catch if there's anything sitting in one of those environments that you weren't expecting, or that is different from what you have in your branch, and you don't want to take the consequences of overwriting that. Okay. And then finally, after production, we can do a commit to the repository, and I'll talk to a couple of the key options or checkboxes available to you there. Okay. Now, just a couple more slides and we'll jump right into a live demo and training session. I want to cover a couple of general tips and tricks and nuances around merging conflicts within Flosum. And so let's talk to a couple of these just to make sure we try to clear up some of the obvious, how should I say it, UI questions that you might have. So I'm just going to walk through these kind of point by point so that we try to create some clarity with those. And the first point I want to call out is all changes occur only on the left panel in the UI. And this left panel is always your source. Okay. So in the example here, we see this left panel. It has the one green line that has a label of new line. When we get to the demo, I'll show this a little bit more. This is the panel. This source code is what is getting changed. Okay, so and by source, where that source ends up, we'll talk about that in a second. There are differences between merging branches and there are between impact analysis, but note that we are only changing the left panel. The right panel is here for comparison purposes. So as we start to merge these conflicts, identify them, do something with them, we don't actually ever change the content here on the right. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. Okay. The target, as I said here, always remains unaffected until the very end of the process, when we either kind of submit that final save button or we click on that continue button at the end. So as we're going through and merging these files, you don't have to worry about am I overwriting something in my org? Am I overwriting something in my target branch? No, you're not at this point in time. Okay. Note that Flosum, some of these files can become very large, so often we'll do a CRC code comparison. And I just want to call out that sometimes a difference will be identified. It will show up as different when you attempt to do that merge and you're identifying what components have those conflicts. Sometimes you can result in a difference being notated, but you go into the file and, oh, hey, I don't see any difference. There's something wrong. Don't worry, it's not wrong. It's just using that that CRC, that code comparison, sometimes identifies an error that once you get into the actual file isn't there. So you can safely ignore those. Okay. Now, just a couple more points in general on use of the UI. I want to call out changes can be done by line block, so we can do them at line block. Direct on the screen between the two panels, or we can do them in bulk based upon a merge option selected. And so we'll look at these merge options here in just a minute. We've chatted about the same UI is being used. And number two, these arrows here are functional. And I think I'll talk about those a little more in impact analysis, but you can use those arrows. You don't actually have to scroll through and find errors. In a case where you maybe have three differences, these arrow buttons are a nice, easy trick to get to those changes quickly and easily. Okay, so now there's quite a bit of text here, and so my apologies for that, but I wanted to make sure we have it here just so you can actually see and notate it and not have to just listen to a voice and get it. There are some nuances to merging. You'll get nuances with any merge tool you have, but there are some nuances to merging. So I've split those into kind of, I'll talk mainly to our two key areas, so merging branches and impact analysis. In merging branches, I do want to make sure we note is that when we are merging, the merge occurs on the target branch at the very end of the process. So what that means is if I have a feature branch that I am merging into a release branch, I will go through and I will merge all of the conflicts required within the components that are identified. And what happens is we end up keeping those changes in a temporary storage. So we don't actually change anything yet. We keep all those changes that you have done in memory. We keep them temporarily. And at the very end, after you have gone through and merged each of your conflicts, each of your components that have conflicts, when you push that continue button, at that point, and only at that point, will your target branch be updated with those merged components. So I'm going to jump over to impact analysis because that differs slightly. On impact analysis, you would typically run that from a release branch. When I am doing my comparison against my target org, and at the end I go through, I merge all of my conflicts. We'll see this on the screen. And at the point where I'm happy that I've captured any of those potential real-time conflicts, when I press save, I am actually saving it on that release branch. So that is a nuance to be aware of. Merging branches, you end up at the end of the process, you save it onto the target branch. Impact analysis, at the end of the process, you end up saving it onto the source branch. Okay. On merging branches, there is one more component that I want to, or not one more component, but one more notation that I want to raise. We will see auto-resolved. I am going to look at this today. So what auto-resolved means and what it assumes is when you see that auto-resolved text, that comes out when the same developer has made the changes on both the target branch and the same developer has changed that component on the let's say the feature branch that they are going to merge. And Flosum kind of assumes that that developer knows what they're doing. So it just marks this as auto-resolved because the same developer made that change. However, you can still dive into that and you can merge that conflict if you think and believe you still need to do so. So you just want to make sure that that is known as well. Okay. And then just a couple of final things I want to call out on the bottom of the page. One around committing to the repository. So often when you're committing to the repository, not often, when you're committing to the repository, you do have an option to merge the contents of your branch against what is in the repository, against the source code. I know some of you out there are probably familiar. If you're familiar with a Git-based system, you always kind of do that merge and compare and do that against the source code. It is not necessary in Flosum. There are a couple of opportunities where it might make sense to do so. I would suggest it is most common not to merge against the repository. And we're going to look at this option on what we would recommend. And so we will recommend this force commit option, which basically means you're going to take that branch and you're going to commit a new version into your repository of what is exactly on that branch. And most often that is what you're looking for anyhow, because you've actually, that's the change that you've done. That's the change that you've deployed to production. And so you want to commit that to the repository as is. The one kind of caveat that you may want to consider a little bit separate from that is around profiles as an example. So profiles, we know, and especially if you use the get profiles option within Flosum, it's a partial deployment. If you have a full profile in your repository and you have a partial profile in your branch, if you commit to the repository, you're going to end up and use this force commit, you're going to end up with a partial partial profile in your repository. So in the profile case, it might make sense to merge. And I want to kind of call out that one of the options you can do is just in that bulk option piece that we're going to see here in a minute is just select the red missing lines. And we can do a bulk operation to kind of make sure that you don't, we merge all the missing lines from your repository into what is in your branch. And so you keep your profile fully intact there. And then finally, I'll just advise on a couple of practices that we usually make note of for our customers. So number one, we do advise that, and we find companies that follow this, that distribute the responsibility for merging conflicts, that make developers responsible for this. We do advise that. It helps avoid bottlenecks with only having release managers try to merge conflicts. Often release managers, you'll have a conflict, you're not sure, should it come from developer 1 or developer 2? You have to have that conversation. Often developer 1 and developer 2 are going to be most efficient when doing so. Number two, when having your developers merge these conflicts, often it will increase the speed at which you can complete this operation, because those closest to the code are often those most efficient at managing and merging those changes. And then finally, one good practice I'd like to call out, and we showed it on the screen a couple of screens ago, is especially in earlier environments, when you are merging into team branches, or even if you're merging into release branches at an early stage, we do recommend you attach a pipeline to that branch that you're merging into. And then from that, you can automate certain deployments, at least automate validations, and you can kind of embrace a more true, a more full CI/CD process that way. Now, with any of these practices, if you have any questions, any one of our CSMs would be happy to review those with you. So I would encourage you bring that topic up with your CSM. Okay. And finally, before I escape, we do have information on impact analysis. We do have articles on merging branches, and the Success Portal is a good option for you to go and have a look at. Further information, written information on those. And yes, we still do also, as I said before, recommend you bring that up with your customer success manager. Okay, with that, I have finished the presentation portion of today's meeting. And now I'd like to actually jump right into merging conflicts into kind of a live demo and walkthrough of those conflict screens. So when I jump over here, we're now in Flosum on an org that we have, and I want to kind of focus on a couple of areas. I have navigated already to a branch that I have. This branch has a number of components in it. Yes, we do have some destructive changes, so I just want to make sure that you can see that. I also want to call out another branch that we have here. I also have another branch, and I've just called I've kind of set this up as our release branch. And you can see, just so that you know, it has one version of every one of these components in this release branch. Let's jump back to the original branch that I was looking at. Okay. So the first capability that we're going to look at is, how do I merge conflicts when I'm going from one branch into a consolidated branch? So in this case, I've either used Flosum Sandbox, I've performed my snapshot, I've collected all of the components that I need to comprise the change that meet the requirement that I'm looking to do. I've put this all into branch 19, which I'll consider my feature branch for this particular feature or this particular requirement. At this point in time, pending what your process is, I may also have had a pull request completed on this branch. So somebody might have reviewed my code already. And pending your process, I might have also set static code analysis up. So I've already ran a code quality scan against this branch. So I'm comfortable, I'm ready. I'm the developer of this branch. I'm ready to pass this requirement on because I want to get on to my next requirement or my next challenge that I need to make changes on. And to do that, it's really, the initial piece is really simple. I'm going to select this merge branch button. Now, when I select that merge branch button, I'm going to go through and I can either merge it to a new branch if in your process I have that set to do so. In this case, and in most cases, I'm actually going to select a specific branch that I want to merge to. And we have this July 28th demo release branch that we have. And this release branch might have been set up by my release manager or someone that has the appropriate knowledge and maintenance of what we want to do in release branches, whether that's a sprint branch or an actual release branch that we're going to target on a date or timeline. Okay. And now, simply by doing that, we're going to have a screen that gets popped up that is going to identify all areas where we have conflicts. And now from this screen, this is where I have the ability to go through and find those components that have conflicts and merge those or manage those so I don't overwrite any code. Okay. We are generally presented with 3 sections. So we have components that will be merged. So these are the areas that I need to do some focus on, and I'll talk about that later. And we have those components that will not be merged. And typically, these are typically components that are identical to what is sitting in that target branch. And just for demo purposes, I have quite a few of these. In most cases, you won't see this section being that large. Okay, so we have a couple of examples here. I'm going to focus largely on one of them, and we're going to walk through a merge process with that. Before I get to that and walk through that branch, I just want to call out a couple of general options for when we want to complete this merge to branch. So if I decide that, hey, you know what, I don't want to worry about any of these conflicts. I know what I have is the latest and greatest, and this is what has to go as is. I can actually do that. I can just actually select this checkbox, and you'll see we actually resolve those conflicts right off the hop, and I can merge that to the branch as is without making any changes or worrying about those conflicts. Number two, if I want, I can actually take, and as I am merging my conflicts, I can also, by using this checkbox here, save that merged file back down to my source branch. Because if you remember earlier, what we're going to do is we're going to go through each one of these. In this case, it's only two. We would merge those conflicts for these particular files, and it keeps this merged file in a temporary location. It keeps it stored in memory. When I am happy that I have merged all the files I need to merge, at this point, I can click my Merge to Branch button, and those temporary files that we have in memory will be stored on the target branch. So in this case, we are going to be storing those merged files on this AA July 28th demo release branch. If I need to persist those in my source branch, I can use this checkbox to do so. Usually, we do not recommend that you store merged files on your source branch. We usually recommend that you keep your source branches, how should I say it, pristine to the requirement that you were working on. And the reason for that is so that you keep that code in a merged state. Because when we get down the line with this release branch, if you find that the business decides a particular requirement should be removed or not proceed, it gets that much more challenging to try and untangle code that is now mixed between two requirements. Whereas if you just leave your source branches in their pristine state, you can always reassemble those into a new branch if you want. Okay, so I just want to call out this option is available for you, but our general advice is don't use it unless you have a specific requirement to do so, and we'd be happy to review that requirement with you to see if we have any suggestions. Okay, with that, what I would like to do is now talk about the actual merge conflict screen and how does that work. So we can get to that merge conflict screen. In this example, it's real evident. This is a profile, so I don't want to get into the conflict on this profile. It's actually not that useful in the sample that I pulled. There's a lot of missing red lines, so I'm kind of going to ignore this one. But what I do want to show is where it says auto-resolved here, we actually have not merged anything between my original, that branch 19, my source branch, and my target branch, this July 28th demo release branch. But if I'm not for sure comfortable that even though I've done the changes, maybe I've done the changes, maybe they come from a couple of different orgs potentially, or I want to be sure, I can still click into this auto-resolved link. And what will happen is the UI on where I am going to merge my conflicts will pop up. And now this is kind of the heart of your merge conflict screen. So let's walk through some of the options that are available to you here. Number one, this isn't the greatest example. I'll show that with impact analysis, but we can navigate between our differences using these arrows. Number two, we have this merge options section here. And what this section basically allows me to do is to perform an operation in bulk on a specific type of change. So we will see any changes that exist on a line, those will be notated in yellow. And in this case, we can see line 5. We have this line 5 in my release branch has this merge test text on it, where it doesn't have it in my original source branch. So it notates this in yellow because that is a change. Anything that is missing on my source component is identified in red, and it identifies it in the target code. So we can see in the target code, we have this labeled test line that is here. That does not exist in my source branch. So if I was to deploy this as is, we would lose this red test line at that point in time. And finally, any lines that I have introduced new into the component that I was developing on will show in green. So there we have it. Green are new lines that we've added. Red lines are lines that we are missing from our source code. And yellow are lines that have changed. And in these merge options, you can see I can select all or...
Hey, Don, sorry to interrupt. They can't see the
Yes.
merge screen.
Oh, the merge screen is not showing?
Correct.
Oh, my apologies. Here, let me stop my sharing. I will reshare. Thank you, Neff. Does that look better enough?
Looks great.
Perfect. Okay. So my apology, I was talking about all these red, yellow, and green screens, and you probably haven't seen them, but hopefully this recovers that. So we can see the red lines here that I'm missing in my source code that do exist on my target. The green is the new lines I've introduced into my source code, and the yellow represents the changes on those lines from my source code to the target. Okay. This merge option box that we see showing at the top of the screen has check marks in it and allows us to select a particular type of change. And so in this example, and what I might do in the profile example that I mentioned earlier, I can actually select, okay, I want to make sure all the change lines and lines that I've introduced, I want to leave as is, but I want to make sure I don't miss any lines. I can actually just select this box and click on this merge button. And you will see that line 3 that was previously read before has been merged over into my source code. And I can undo these at any point in time. So that would be a pretty common operation. If you have a bulk of changes, you can use these merge options up here to make changes in bulk if you are comfortable doing so. Okay. Number 2, I can actually make changes on a line by line or block by block basis. So I can actually go through, use my buttons, and at each change I see, I can come through and evaluate each line. This label test line, yes, I want to make sure I do that. And you can see that that moves that over just the same as what we did before. I'll click undo. If I see a line that I have entered new, that is new to my code, and as I'm reviewing and comparing these files, I decide, you know what, I actually don't really need this new line because I only want this test line label, I can actually now remove that from my source code. And I can just click that button, it removes it. Note that it does not add that line to my target. It just simply removes it from my source panel here on the left. And finally, yes, I can merge any of those changed lines. If I like the line in this line 5 case, this is the line I want to keep, I need to do nothing. If I see, oh, actually, you know what, in my target, I do need this merge test option, or I do need that change, again, I can switch that line over with a click of a button. Click undo. So relatively straightforward, relatively kind of click and choose. You have the ability to do those selectively or in bulk. If I choose, I can actually, I'm coming in here, I can actually edit this screen and edit the text directly in my source org. So where I have these FLS backup settings, I can come in here and I can update that as I need to do if you have a need to do that or you want to make changes manually. That capability is certainly available for you. Okay. I will go back to our previous option. So for now, let's just go through and do a sample merge. I want to show what that looks like on the next screen. So as I go through, I evaluate these. Yeah, I actually don't need this test line. However, I do want this changed line. That was a mistake by me, or not a mistake. It was a change that maybe somebody else has already done. And so in the example, I'll use Neff's name because he jumped in here and alerted me to the screen not showing. Maybe Neff made this change merge test that I hadn't accommodated for in the source code I was looking for. I don't want to overwrite Neff's change because otherwise they're identical. So I'm going to capture Neff's change and I'm going to move that over into my source on the left. With that, I am happy with the changes I've done. I've merged what I need to merge. I've kept my new line. I've ignored the previous line. I've included this line. I'm going to press save. Now, what we see here on this screen that we were at previously we can see that the comparison or the status has switched from auto-resolved to merged. And I can go through and I can do these for each of the files that I see here that are needed. Now, at the point that I am complete with merging my conflicts, at this point, everything is still stored in a temporary container. I don't want to do a force commit. I don't want to save my merged component onto my source branch. I'm going to keep my source branch pristine. At this point, I am ready to select merge to branch, and the action of pressing this button will actually, oh, my apologies, I have to select at least one component. So let's just select the one that I merged. The act of pressing this button actually now completes this merge process. So what happens here is I take these merged files and all the files that we did not change that were sitting in that branch. So those files that might be new as an example, and we are going to actually merge and place those into my release branch. And it's just taking a second or two here, and we'll show the end result of that. Okay, great. And now at the end, we end up where the screen navigates to is that target. So we are sitting now on my July 28th release branch. And you can see, as you would expect, this FLS backup settings component, we now have a new version of that. And it's listed as version 2 here in this particular branch. At some point, if I want, I can actually just click on this component. Maybe I've done a couple of different merges. I'm just highlighting this for your information. We can actually select different versions between those components on my branch that we have merged. I can run a comparison of those, and it's just going to take a second here to render. And I can see here's the differences between those different versions that I had on this particular branch. Okay. Just canceling out of here. I want to, I can come back to branch 47. I'm just gonna stay on branch, actually no, let's go to, no, I was in branch 19, sorry. And at that point in time, I have my release branch ready to go. At that point in time, I am now ready to perform an operation on it. Maybe I have a pipeline attached to it that would automatically take that and deploy to a QA environment. Or maybe I'm at the point after I merge those branches where I want to deploy that to a higher level environment. Maybe I want to deploy it to a UAT and or a production after the operations. Maybe after testing is complete, I'm happy with the components as they are in my release branch. If any changes have been done, I've made those and I've merged those changes in, and I'm ready to deploy. When I am ready to deploy, this brings about kind of option 2 on an opportunity to merge conflicts, though it is a little bit different style of conflict merge. And we'll do that by impact analysis. I'm going to kick impact analysis off first. While it is running and doing its comparison, I'll talk a little bit about what's happening and what we are doing. So with impact analysis, what we are going to be doing is a real-time conflict check against a specific org. So whether this is your UAT org or your production org, what you will always do is you will select the org. We generally will recommend, and we're going to select the org, we're going to run this impact analysis button. What we generally recommend is, because this is a real-time conflict check, it is a good practice to run impact analysis before you do a deployment to any of your important or key upper level environments. Again, if I come back to the use case or the scenarios, maybe someone has done changes directly in one of these environments, maybe a different project working on a different stream where you don't actually assimilate your project branches into a common release branch. Maybe they have deployed first and you don't want to overwrite those changes. Impact analysis does this conflict check against your org so that you can actually identify what those differences are. And if you have those differences, you can actually go in and capture those and navigate to those so that you don't have to worry about overwriting either manually done changes or changes done by a different project. Okay. And again, impact analysis, we end up at a screen quite similar to what you saw with merging branches. we end up with a screen where we see, okay, we've got components in the branch and the target that have differences. We see, in this case, we've got a whole bunch of components that are actually missing from the target org, so they're going to be new. We're generally pretty safe. We don't have to resolve those. If I actually want to go in and look at these differences, I should expect differences. I mean, I am doing a deployment. If nothing has changed, it would be a bit strange to need to go in and look at these. So, but I now have the ability to go in and have that look. So I'll click on that different link, and you can see it pulls up this account custom object. And now we have changes. We note that we have 62 differences, and we could navigate to them via this color coding here. On the left, you can see where the green means I've added new lines. The red means there's missing lines that exist on my target org, but not in my branch here. And we could see yellow lines as well. An easy way to navigate through these would be, again, let's just use these arrows, and I can come and see, okay, I've added these new lines here. You can see we have them in a block view, and I can continue to scroll down and see a set of lines. Okay, so again, common, exact same process as what we saw with merge branching. I can actually select all my missing lines and simply merge any missing lines that I'm seeing over if I want to make sure that I have the situation where I am maintaining the lines I've added and maintaining the lines I've changed. And I can merge all those over with one click of a button, and you see those disappear. Or if I want to be sure and I want to be granular, I can go over and using these arrows go kind of line by line. Okay, yeah, I got that one. I don't want to lose that line. I don't want to take those consequences. And I can use these buttons and scroll through and manage and merge these conflicts. I'll undo each of those. I will go through, I will manage and merge each of these. And at the end, when I am complete, I will press my save button here. And what this will do again is save that into a temporary location so that I have the ability to go through and manage or merge all of the conflicts I see. When I have done that, I didn't save this one in this particular branch. Actually, no, I don't want to do that yet. We will end up with that merged text that we saw previously. And when I have completed that, I've done my look through, I'm comfortable with those changes, I press save. The act of pressing save here saves these merged files onto my release branch. So I now have a release branch that I have merged into, merged any conflicts I'd noticed in my target org that I did not want to lose if I was to do a deployment. And at the end of the day, after I press save, I will end up back at my branch, and now I can either validate, deploy, etc. with my branch. Okay. So largely that takes care of the bulk of our two primary places to merge conflicts, those being the merge branch capability. So this is the case or the use case where I want to take a feature branch and merge into a release branch or a project branch of some sort. And impact analysis, which is that real-time conflict check that I would typically run before I do a deployment to a target org so that I don't inadvertently overwrite anything in that target org. I do want to cover one more topic that will take 1 minute here, and that is after I've done impact analysis, let's say I have deployed my changes. I have deployed my changes to production. So I now have a release branch that I've deployed to production. I have these components sitting in it. I'm happy with that deployment. And now I want to make sure that my components in my branch are now committed to the repository. So I have that permanent record. And to do so, I simply click on this commit to repository button, and we'll give that a second for the screen to render here. In this case, they're all coming across as new because I don't have this repository fully updated, kind of a shame on me. But when I'm going to commit to my repository, I just want to kind of come back and reflect to a comment I made earlier in my slide presentation on some options available when I'm committing. So number one, if I have deployed my branch, I've merged my changes, I've deployed that branch to production, I actually, if I had conflicts here, I don't need to go through and merge each of these conflicts with my repository. In that case, if I have already deployed, that is the version that is in production now, I can use this force commit option. And if I use this force commit option, what that will do, we don't have that case here, is it will allow me to simply click this continue to commit to repository, and the version that is sitting on my branch will be committed to the repository as a new version in the repository. So that would be a more typical use case for the majority of our clients, and a more typical practice that you simply commit those components you've already deployed to the repository. Now, if you have a process where you're committing to the repository first before you do a deployment, and you have some checks and balances with that approach, at that point, maybe the force commit option should be reconsidered. But again, I would ask, just have a chat with your customer success manager, and we can chat through that process with you. Okay. The one kind of on a standard deployment after you have deployed, kind of one comment that I'll make where this may or may not make sense is if you have profiles. And again, profiles, if you want to maintain your entire profile in your repository, you may want to merge that profile. And I think we talked about a couple of examples with that, where we had that red option in the merge options field. Anything that is green that you've added new, or anything that is yellow that you've updated, you want to maintain. But if you keep that, do that kind of bulk change on all those missing lines that you have in your source, and save that to your branch, you can actually then commit the entire profile back to your repository. So I just wanted to call out a couple of those options quickly for you. Okay, so with that, I'll just kind of recap. We have talked about merge conflicts and the opportunities, and where we can merge our conflicts, manage those changes between developers. We've chatted about the UI screen, the ability to do it line by line in bulk, the temporary nature where we're not impacting our target. We've talked about the differences between merging branches and impact analysis. On merging branches, you are at the very end of the process updating that release branch, and on impact analysis, you are actually impacting, or you are updating your source branch, which is typically your release branch. And then we've talked about some of the practices and kind of responsibilities, and how to sometimes potentially reduce bottlenecks within your team. So very pleased to present merge conflicts to you. If you have any further questions on merging conflicts, on how you would manage that, on how you would work this best with your team, please do follow up direct with your customer success manager. We would be more than happy to have a direct follow-up with you on this capability, or on any of the questions you have. And with that, that kind of wraps our merge conflict training. I do appreciate your time, and thank you all for that. As a follow-up to that, we will be holding regular monthly training sessions. We do have an agenda for the next session. The next session will be centered around our data migrator product. And we are going to walk you through and do some training on how to maintain relationships between, or with the data that you are migrating, how to use the overlay steps so that you maintain your parent and your child relationships, and how data migrator helps traverse through that. So that is the planned target for the next session, and invites will be going out for that in probably a couple of weeks or so. So look for that email. If you're having challenges with the email, again, please contact your customer success manager. We will work to get that straightened out with you. Okay. Given that, I think we will stop the share. We will close the session for today. And again, thank you. We appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session.